Okay, I don't see anybody outside and milling around in the hallways, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Suzanne Verity. I'm publisher at EB Medicine. We are in the emergency medicine space and primarily focused on print publications as well as CME and video blended learning type programs. So that's our neck of the woods. I'm very pleased to introduce to you, we're going to have a session and really talk about some very dynamic concepts. We might even talk about a few controversial subjects. I suspect there will be some of you that will be intrigued and some of you that may even be a little bit irritated, but we'll have a little forum to be able to talk about that and see how things can be done differently. NewsRx is the presenter, the company represented here. C.W. Henderson is the president. He'll be our first speaker. And to really capture what NewsRx has done over time, they started out, and this has always been interesting to me because I used to work at a company at American Health Consultants based in Atlanta, where CW is as well. And his company started actually at the urging of the CDC. You know, I can't even imagine that. They had mortality and morbidity weekly, but they needed somebody that could be out there in the news space back at the time when AIDS, HIV was, just basically discovered. I mean, at the very beginning of that. So he has parlayed that into quite a large empire of business, I would say. NewsRx pioneered artificial intelligence journalism. He'll use the shorthand AI journalism, and focuses on financial tech, data analytics, ed tech with search apps, platforms, automated narratives, and SaaS. So they've really moved from the print newsletter space into an entirely different sphere. They currently publish 194 newsletters, and the New York Times called NewsRx the largest health news company. Quite a title from somebody we all respect as an arbiter of these things. He will be joined, Kalani Rossell is VP and publisher at NewsRx. He is creating and implementing client acquisition strategies while also identifying opportunities to foster new business partnerships and growth. In 2012, he actually founded and was CEO of a business called Pubz, P-U-B-Z, an online research workflow solution sourced from periodicals and professional content that he then led to a strategic merger with NewsRx in January of last year. So I've got a few props. I know there are things required if you're after lunch. So you saw the theme of our session here, dinosaurs, so I've got a few of those. It may take two of those to every one now cyborg, and this is the best you can find at the dollar store, but it's got all the bells and whistles and tricks, and a few of them are even still up in my room, so I don't know what this transforms into, but essentially this is what we're going to talk about, evolution and transformation within the publishing world. I will ask that at the beginning, and there's a real reason for this. CW, if you will hold your questions until he is completely finished with his presentation, he'll tell a story and have a narrative of his business. And you'll find out the reason for that, just for the lack of interruption at the end of his session, I think. And then, very exciting, we're going to do a real-time, we're going to allow you to participate. We're going to do a real-time demo of how they might create a publication on a specific topic, and we'll do that in real time. You'll have a surprise ending and conclusion by the end of this session. So let's hope that the internet gods cooperate, but we think we've got them in line. So I'll take my props, sit over here, and let you hear from CW first. You can take these home.
Thank you. So when Gutenberg invented the printing press, there were some people who became publishing dinosaurs. All those people who were doing things by hand, they were out of their jobs. But there were some people who did embrace the new technologies then. And there were some publishers who embraced that new technology. Probably the biggest one was the Bible publishers. The Bible industry then flourished because they embraced the new technology. Since we're here in D.C., here are some comments from readers of the Washington Post last month about journalism and publishing today. It isn't dying. It's been dead for years. Journalism isn't dying. You cannot die if you're already dead and gone. Journalism isn't dying, but it's changing way faster than most people understand. Just as the Bible publishers embraced Gutenberg in the 1400s, today publishers must embrace the new technologies. Some 48 years ago, I was working my way through journalism school and earning money editing monographs for one of my college's VPs. I edited his research papers, typed them up, and then I printed them on the latest machine printer of that time, which was the ABDIC 360. And I don't think there is anybody here old enough to know or have ever, there's one person who has seen an ABDIC 360. It may have been a used one, huh? Or was it a new one? It was a used one, okay. That university office also embraced another new technology, which was the mainframe IBM computer. And part of my job involved taking stacks and stacks of these big, long brown boxes full of something called IBM punch cards. Has anybody ever seen one of those? Okay, there are some. And, you know, I didn't really like going over there. I really didn't know what was going on. I would just carry them. I had a Volkswagen convertible then, and I would, you know, put them in there and drive over to the computer center and just take the boxes inside and leave them. So one day I was taking the boxes over and tripped and fell. And there were thousands and thousands of computer cards just blowing in the wind, in the bushes, in the shrubbery. I very carefully gathered every single one of them up, just took the pile of mess inside the computer center, and they said there was nothing they could do. No one could help me until the night shift came on. So if I would stay until the night shift came and stay all night, they would help me. So I did. I embraced the new technology. I learned how to duplicate those dirty cards. I learned how to put them in the sorting machine and re-put them in the correct order. And because I embraced that new technology, I kept my job. So just 17 years ago, and according to the history of artificial intelligence, as well as a scholarly paper called The Journalist Machine, I found myself at a company whose technology amounted to what they call the Gutenberg press of the 21st century. At that time, our publishing technology at NewsRx was much like a cyborg. It was a human-machine system and was described by the history of AI as the beginning of the marriage of artificial intelligence and journalism. So what is this machine technology called? So it goes by a number of phrases and buzzwords. You can call it writing by algorithms, machine writing, automated journalism, artificial intelligence journalism, or AIJ, which is what I prefer to call it, or machine writing, robot writing, robot journalism, artificial intelligence for publishers. So what U.S. companies are embracing the new technologies of machine writing? You'll recognize these. Forbes frequently has articles that I notice, Dow Jones, AP, Thomson Reuters, LA Times, NewsRx. And here in the U.S., there are 3 major players developing these technologies. In addition to these U.S. ones, there are a couple in Germany, one in the U.K. There are some, I think there's a total of an additional 4 elsewhere in the world. But the 3 companies in this country are Narrative Science, NewsRx, and Automated Insights. Although 15 years ago, a selection of our articles and publishing system were completely automated, most of it was a cyborg system. Machines doing the grunt work and layout, and humans polishing it all up. Then a decade ago, it came time to totally automate. And at that time, I remembered a new book that was out. It was a Pulitzer Prize-winning book by my favorite modern-day author, John McPhee, and it was titled The Soul of a New Machine. That book had come out in June of 2000. So how could we add soul to our machine-written articles? How could we make the machines the same as humans? As part of my job, which I'm sure at least some of you, if not most of you, have done, is the never-ending process of training new hires. It always fell on my shoulders to train the new writers, and I had my popular among my staff 10-point writing system, and I like to do my workshops on the 10 things. If you did these 10 things, you would always have a perfect news article. And so every time we had a new hire, I did that again. So one day, I sat down with our head of IT, and I asked him if we could turn my 10-point writing system into software. And he said, well, we could, but he would need at least 100 points. So I changed it to 100, and then he said, no, he would need more like 1,000 points. So I don't know how many it ended up being, but eventually it became software that writes news articles exactly the way I wrote them. And I had added soul to our machine system, and it was my soul. Later, when I was working on my PhD, my thesis had to be about discoveries that had never been made before. It had to be about something all new. So I wanted to figure out how to make our artificial intelligence journalists always know what it was doing, just supposedly like I knew what I was doing. So we developed something new called phenomenological artificial intelligence writing, and which made sure our articles had 3 important features. They would go deep, they would make connections, and they would have important aspects of discovery. Going deep does not always mean going long, and most of our machine articles are about 600 words. Making connections meant connections with the reader, as well as connections among the facts for better insight. And finally, what was the most important part of our machine writing was discovery. The machine-written articles had to be about making discoveries. That process grew into a bigger system, and today we have a product called Butter that monitors all new discoveries taking place anywhere in the world and then writes a news article automatically about each of them. Now that I've been talking about cyborgs and artificial intelligence, let me talk a little bit about what AI is. What we do is best described as machines writing articles. But these are just machines on a desk or in the cloud that are powered by a lot of computer code and algorithms. We also use a small amount of self-learning software and natural language processing. We prefer to write our own code and use our own algorithms. And so you may have seen some articles out there before, I don't know, that may have been machine written. This is an example of one I actually pulled up And this was written probably by using natural language. But you see some of the mistakes it made, like workers private a banana company's trademark from a tip of a building in November. And, you can see where it kind of tried to use thesaurus or something to substitute words. In a understanding that hasn't sealed yet, Lincoln Harris hasn't pronounced what is skeleton to do with a 9-point-acre site. You know, it becomes kind of, you know, you can't just use an off-the-shelf software or just say you're going to use natural language processing and do it. So here's some examples of how to do it right. This is from an article from NewsRx based on data, and it's very smoothly written. And this is a machine-written article that is based on a data set that pulls the information in. A company that's been in the news a lot, Automated Insights, which writes this articles the same way, using a data sets, and they sell them to AP. They do all the quarterly financial reports and turn them into automated articles for the Associated Press. What our company does best is write articles from text, and this is an example of an article, fact-based article on the Zika virus, and it pulls the information in and writes the automatic article. Yes, uh-huh. Yes, that was that was from a university research report.
So how does that actually work? You ingest it into your software?
Yes.
And it runs through it and it just spits out the article, or is there...
Okay, it actually finds the raw data, the raw text, and decides if it's good or bad text, if it's accurate or not. And if it is good data, then it writes the article about it. And there are many, many steps that it goes through before we actually publish it, but that's generally how it does it.
I assume a final editor is looking at the output, or what is it? There's got to be some human intervention, or no? Does it just go right?
There was for a long time, until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, and now humans do not look at anything anymore. It took a number of years to get the error rate down low enough so that people did not have to look at them anymore. But we did that for many years. We'd monitor the system. But now it's a self-monitoring system.
Right. But what's the kind of onboarding process? If you use your software, and let's say we wanted to run it against a new kind of content set, what's the on-ramp, what's the onboarding? How long does it take the software to get used to a new type of content?
Yes. Connie, you want to answer that one or no?
Is it on? All right. Essentially, what we look at is we look at the content itself, the structure of the content. In some way, content has to be put into a structured set. So when we're looking at an individual article, we look at the metadata behind it. We look at how that's set up. What taxonomy does it use? And once we can identify that, if it's, more often than not, content's not up to par. So we'd have to improve that and get it up to par so that our systems, can actually use it effectively. The taxonomy we use is somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 words. So, that makes it a lot easier for us to find related sets of content, find content that that may go under the radar in a lot of instances just because it's a similar, it's a different topic, but they fall under similar sets of keywords. So in a nutshell, that's how we look at new sets of content and then applying our technology to that. Once it's in a structured set, our software can pretty much handle anything. So, in a nutshell.
So in 2016, what do you call someone whose output is journalism? Well, today it's a digital journalist. So regardless of what your background is, if you had been a computer programmer, if you had been writing code, if your output is journalism, you're a digital journalist. If your output is news reporting, and that's the output from your machine, then you are a reporter, the person who's operating the machine. Our journalists have not been replaced by machines. Our ideal hire would be someone who knew about journalism, preferably a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and also knows about IT, that maybe Facebook tried to hire but couldn't get them. Our digital journalists may have a degree in journalism, or they may have a Master of Science in Information Technology. Then when planning automation, we have learned that rather than focusing just on computer code, merely creating information, that we needed to focus on creating knowledge instead. All information is not knowledge, as we all know from searching Google. And what else have we learned? Our robots, I should have put the word sometimes superior to humans. And the major areas are speed, quantity, accuracy, quality, and cost. Machines are able to get the latest news out faster. The time from the event happening to the news article to a newsletter is significantly shortened with machines. Machines can write more articles than humans. Machines are more accurate. They don't make all the mistakes that human writers do. Machines don't daydream. They don't take coffee breaks. I see some of you take coffee breaks, right? So you're not machines. Machines produce articles that have a higher quality if they're focused only on the facts. And these articles don't contain bias or opinion. And then the computer can also put in citations explaining where the machine got the information from for the article. There have been 3 significant research studies done on the credibility of machine-written journalism. 2 studies in 2014 and 1 in 2016 published just 2 months ago. The 2016 study had almost 1,000 participants, and they agreed, that study agreed with the findings of the 2 previous studies done in 2014. Computer-written news tends to be rated higher than machine-written news in terms of credibility. Readers like to read texts generated by computers, especially when they are unaware that what they are reading was assembled on the basis of an algorithm. One of the authors of the new 1,000-person experiment, who is from Columbia, concluded that the reader's impression of precision strongly contributes to their perception that the machine-written articles are more trustworthy. Also, machines are cheaper than humans and can allow you to save money on editorial, on graphics and layout, and on distribution. Machines can produce the entire newsletter, select the best articles, create your editor's choice section, and perform the graphics and layout based on your design that you like and have programmed into the machine system. Your newsletter can then be automatically emailed or mailed out. Machines allow a publisher to shift its best resource, its humans, into doing what they do best. Your best articles are always going to come from human journalists. You get your best readers and followers from your best writers. Your humans will have more time to make you more money by doing what they do best instead of spending time on mundane tasks like research, fact-checking, and editing. all of which can be done by machines. Even with investigative journalism, the new future is allowing humans to make connections by searching a knowledge engine or database. They don't need to hide in the bushes and do sneak attack investigative journalism. They can search through the work that the machine has put together and make new connections and outstanding investigative journalism, all discovered from text data and numeric data. Finally, in conclusion, it says here that at this time I must give acknowledgement to the digital journalist who wrote this talk for me. So kudos to Robot Joe, the machine that wrote this. So I guess I now may have just been replaced by a machine named Robot Joe. But I want you to know that after this session, I will give Robot Joe a hug because I want to embrace new technology. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chucks. What I'll do is I'll show you this. We've taken the automation process to that next step, what Charles alluded to right at the end there, to doing our newsletters automatically. So the articles are written automatically. That process is probably several thousand steps, checks and balances all along the way. All of our content actually goes through a double checking process. We usually, if there's a study or if there's any type of numbers in a study, we cross-check it against 2 to 3 different sources with the same research. Often, if we do find articles that, the math is just not adding up, we don't publish those, but then we do get the retraction request from the actual publisher saying, in case you publish this, the numbers are wrong. So, all that goes into it. But this next step, and I'll hop out of this, let's see, is the creation of an automatic newsletter. So what are the steps that we go into doing that? How do we work with the algorithms to create these newsletters, of which we actually now have 195. We just created a new one, Zika Mosquito Week. Since Zika's been in the news, it's been a hot topic in the world of professional content, so professional research that comes from academic journals and the like. This is actually, I believe, our first or second issue. Second issue, actually. I'm going to take you through the process of how we actually create these. I'll first show you what they initially look like, so you can get an idea of, what these algorithms are capable of. Everything's done automatically. Right now, we have we don't have any writers or editors that actually interact with the content when it's being created. The editor's choice selection is another part of the algorithm process. I could go into how that's selected, but that's very, complicated and it'd take quite a while. But essentially, it's a very straightforward format. This goes back to the first issue Charles wrote in 1984, AIDS Weekly. No fluff. That was the one thing the CDC asked. We want it straightforward, we want it plain, we want facts, and we want to be able to make a decision within 15, 20 seconds of looking at this article. Do we need to see the full study or not? So with that imperative, that's how all of our content is created, and that's how all of our newsletters, that's the focus of them. So let me jump into this. Let me show you a little bit how these algorithms think and how we work with them. When we're looking at creating a new newsletter, it's always topic focused. Zika Mosquito Week obviously was focused on that. There's always a set of keywords that are going to define a newsletter. So if we want to take, for example, a general topic like biotechnology. Oh, and just a quick background. What we're looking at here, this is Butter. This is our interface where we can access all of our content. So when we're doing the search I'm doing right now is just within the past 2 weeks. This is the process we go to see what the content looks like, how it looks, if it's going to work properly for a newsletter when created automatically on a weekly basis. So the first step is defining these overarching keywords that are going to define the newsletter. In this case, very broad, biotechnology. But we can see the types of information in it. And when we interact with the algorithms, we give them a set of beginning keywords, and we see the articles that get spit out. But before we see that set of articles, we define what kind of content do we want. Do we want this to be a research-focused newsletter? Do we want this to be a patent-focused newsletter? Where's this focus going to be? And here we'll actually, the algorithms do all of this. And so this is broken down step by step. It's a little, it's the same process the articles go through to be written. We can't show that naturally because it would take weeks to go through that. But if we did want a research-focused newsletter, we'd narrow it down to that. We would query the algorithm and say, just this content. So we eliminate, the original search had 1,700 articles. We've eliminated 500, narrowed it down a bit, but still this isn't good enough for a newsletter for us. Some of our newsletters are 3,000 to 5,000 articles. Those are exceptions. They are very broad, but when those were created, that was what was asked for those newsletters. So in this case, any newsletters we create, we try to narrow them in, focus them a bit more, so that on a week-to-week basis, we're looking at between 50 to 150 articles in the new newsletter. So in this case, with 1,200, we got to keep narrowing this down. So we then query and ask these algorithms, for content we don't want to see in it, but we want to see what's being removed. So in this case, we can open up these studies, we can look at them, we can understand, is this actually something we don't want in the newsletter? And if it is, why? It takes time to figure these out, but for us, if we do remove this, it's another step in that process, adding filters, going further and further down. What we then look at is what type of narrow filters do we want to add? There's the original set of keywords, which in this case was one, biotechnology. But what additional sets do we want to add in there that will allow us to create a more niche, a more narrow focused newsletter? In this case, we eliminate disease from the equation. So what if we say we want a biotechnology newsletter that's focused on only technology that's happening? So in this case, we could see nanotech, emerging technologies. Those are the top, among the top 10 categories of related keywords. This list naturally, when we're creating a newsletter, goes on as long as we want. If we want, sorry, yeah. Yeah. So when we're creating newsletters, it's our content that we've already created. But where does that come from? That comes from a host of sources. It is. It actually is, absolutely. That's part of the beauty of NewsRx. Since it started in '84, it started, as a weekly newsletter publisher. Just as newsletter publishers are set up today, when they go out to find content, they have to get the rights for that content. And then they write the reports on that content. Because of that, today we have a system that, if you did have to replicate it, it would be an immense headache. We have, in just journals that produce, report on research and studies, we probably have 5,000 or 6,000 that we cover. We do. Absolutely.
We have both license data sets as well as we have some licensing agreements that we pay for, and we have some licensing agreements that are free. Some people want their content, especially authors, especially want their content to go out in our news feeds because they get the recognition. A lot more a lot of journal articles, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of journal articles are only read by less than 10 people ever. And if a short news article on that same one goes out in our system, it's going to be read by a much wider audience. And then that can also send people back to the journal. And they may end up buying that journal article for $35 or however much it costs at the journal's website. So, I don't know about that specific one, but in general, we have many licensing agreements, and some are paid licensing agreements, and some are free licensing agreements. So.
Yeah, so it works both ways, to answer your question. In many cases, we do go out and we pull the information in. In some cases, it is sent to us as well.
Yeah.
So, what specifically that, we can get into those details if you're interested. But that's where the content is coming from. And it's not just it's not just journals. It also, our main categories are trademarks, patents, company announcements, the journals, which is the peer-reviewed research side, as well as SEC filings and any other filings that might be out there. So those are the main topic areas.
A lot of our journal content will come to us straight from the college or university that conducted it, and a lot of times we will get it before it goes out in the journal. So we may have a news article about it before it appears in a journal. So.
And that actually goes into the cross-checking process. When we do get it directly from the university, we also access it from other sources so that we can cross-check and make sure that there's no mistakes in the data. But anyway, jumping back into this, the original set of keywords that we use to define newsletters are usually broad, and then when we start honing in on it, we define further and further what we're looking at. For example, when we were trying to make the Zika Mosquito Week newsletter, okay, Zika, mosquito, those are the two big, areas you want to focus on. So that's what we at first start with querying with the algorithms. What happens with that? Then the algorithms come back and say, well, here are another set of keywords that we need to need to be focused on. So it might be more specifically malaria, larvicides, as mosquito-borne illnesses, which there's a whole host of those. And with our taxonomy, we have all of these. And so with that, we can see a secondary set of keywords that we should focus in on. In this case, this is a very simplistic, example, but this would be the second set of keywords that we would then focus on. And we can see that what we've done is we've gone from 1,700 articles down to a much more focused set of 120. They're dealing with biotechnology, specifically focused on the technology. So we've eliminated diseases. So, it may have medical applications, but if it does, they're not going to be focused on disease. What does that mean? This all goes into the creation process of figuring out specifically what we want. We can also create, you can see here, regions. We can also create filters based on region. So if we want just a U.S.-focused newsletter, we can do that. Just focus on content coming out of the U.S. And at the end, I'll show you a new area we're pushing into its visualizations, but I'll get to that. What happens here is these set of, right here, these set of keywords, key phrases, some of them, those are the main areas, the main subtopics, subheads that all this content is falling into. So these 120 articles, you can see bioengineering, there's 29 of them. Biotechnology, there's 8 of them, etc. In this case, on the platform, what we do is these all fall into chapters. Yeah. No, don't worry.
These categories are automated,
Mm-hmm.
automatically generated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're all automatically created.
Well, you can create may, you can choose filters and topics, but that's what will aggregate them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So depending on whatever set of content we're looking at, these will be different. So in this case, it's all, with this focus. But if we changed it to, for example, looking at AIDS, AIDS would have a completely different set of subtopics and subheads. In this case, again, we call them chapters. We give our clients an end report that they can then use, and that is set up in chapters with table of contents to make it easier to peruse the content and for whatever use they might have for it. The final part, and what I was alluding to, is we're trying to, this is a brand new area that we're looking at. It's visualizations. It's being able to visualize the data that we're looking at. When you're looking at data sets, numbers, it's, that's not hard to visualize. That's, just hop in Excel, put a data set in there, and Excel gives you, hundreds of ways to look at that data, analyze that data, process that data, look at that, actually understand it. For us, this is a first step into it, and with textual-based data, it becomes a little bit more challenging. But one we're actually quite proud of is the region map. This region map is showing where this content is coming from. So of these 120 articles, who's the major producer of them? In this case, we can see it's China. But we can also see right here that Iran has published 9 articles in this field in the past couple of weeks. For our clients, a lot of them, do tend to be researchers, professionals, business professionals doing competitive intelligence. This gives them a lot more knowledge as to, what's happening, where it's happening, which is the biggest issue in some cases because you might have a brand new competitor you know nothing about. And for a lot of us, we are U.S.-centric. Language barriers a lot of times, block us from finding out more information. But this image here is they're not being incorporated yet into the newsletters. We're trying to figure out the best way to make that happen. But in a sense, you could call this our testing ground. So for now, what we can do with this is we can select any one of these subtopics, any one of these chapters, and add that visualization to it. And so when we get to the next step and we actually create this report, what then happens is it will be added for right now, right at the beginning of that, right at the beginning of that chapter. And so this is the layout form. This you'll see what this report looks like. Very similar to our newsletters, but still different. The title, I didn't edit that, but generally speaking, it's a reference to when you did that original search. You can see the table of contents. These are the subcategories all the content falls into. So for us, we added the image, the visualization to this chapter. You can see that it's full text. A lot of these reports are used for a lot of the same reasons our newsletters are, whether that be competitive intelligence, whether that be to keep up with research in a particular field. For researchers, if I focus on them for a second, they look at our content as a quick way to basically do their research. Instead of having to go to a bunch of different websites, search all those websites on a set of keywords, and then search them on a different set of keywords, figure out a new set that then they want to focus on that. Instead of doing all that, we've already done it for them. We've already accessed all the data that they want to look at, all the articles they want to look at, and we've given them the short rundown on what it's talking about. So they can go through these reports real quickly, or they can go through our newsletters really quickly, and identify what is it that they want to actually spend their time doing. So if you're looking at pharmaceutical researchers, they don't have a lot of time to do research. It seems like they should, but a lot of their time is actually spent, there's the bureaucratic processes which take time, but then there's the time that they need to spend in the labs. So how much time can they actually spend doing research? There's not too much time. And that's why a lot of them use our content, because they can spin through it quickly, and when they find something they're interested in, you can see right there, we'll direct them to go find the actual study, and so they can read more about it. The final thing that is in experimental phase for us right now is the index. The index for all of our reports is incredibly robust. In this case, I believe it's 4 or 5 pages. But this is leveraging our taxonomy. And again, it's adding more knowledge. It's adding more transparency. It's adding the ability for people to find the exact knowledge they're looking for in a much faster way. This index is customized for every single report. If it does become a part of our newsletters, it would be customized specifically for each newsletter. And it wouldn't be the same. So, AIDS Weekly wouldn't have the same index every week. Every week it would depend on what content is in that newsletter. So in a nutshell, that's the process we go through working with our algorithms. And once we have this set, naturally, Zika Mosquito Week took us a few months to really finalize and hone in on before we wanted to give it a publishing date. But the back and forth is, I guess you could say, is how we interact with these algorithms. They have a way of, and I say they like it's a person. It's not there yet, but it's starting to be. We can ask it a question. We can say we want, a newsletter on Zika and mosquitoes, and it will produce back to us and say, all right, these are the keywords you need to focus on. We'll pull all those in, and from there we can begin our creation of it. So, automatic newsletters, automatic journal writing, report writing. That's the area that a lot of there's been a lot of pushback. There's been a lot of writers and journalists that say this shouldn't be happening. It's taking our jobs away. But the real way to look at it is there's a lot of reporting that's not getting done that could get done. If you look at crime reporting, that's an example that's been in and out of the news and in and out of studies. Crime reporting, for certain neighborhoods, they really want to know what crimes are happening. For me, I don't care. If it's out in California, but if it's in my backyard, I want to know about it. But if a lot of times, take LA, homicides are through the roof. I think over 1,000 a year. How many of those can actually be reported on by people? Not that many. So what ends up happening is there are a few cases that get reported on that are extremely brutal, have a really sad story, whatever it might be, and those get sensationalized. But nothing is ever said about the smaller crimes that are happening in neighborhoods, whether they're wealthy neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, whatever that might be. By using automated journalism, you can report on those. And they might not get nearly the same amount of hits as a sensationalized piece, a piece that goes viral maybe, a story that goes viral. But those hits begin to add up. If you only publish 11 homicide stories and you could be publishing 1,000, the additional 989 stories that get published are all going to get views. And for publishers dealing, with digital content on the internet, all those additional views are going to add up. And if you, base your part of your revenue off of ads, that's a huge boost. And so that's the way automated journalism, should be viewed, not as the bad guy, not as the thing that's taking our jobs, but more so as taking a step back. How can it help us? Anyway, there's a lot more that can be talked on there. But at the end of the day, those are the algorithms. That's our story, and that's how we do it.
Kalani, can you tell us, how would you all best describe your business? I mean, are you a publisher? Are you a data integrator? Are you, fill in the blank?
The best way to describe it is we're a publisher and a technology company. Obviously, we're a publisher. We still publish 195 news weeklies. Publishing is still, the core of the business. It's the main revenue generator. But, with that said, how are we publishing all this content? Technology. That's the level we've come to, and that's where we spend, most of our time is how can we make it better? How can we make it more effective? How can we apply it to new areas? So I think that's the best I can answer that question.
I think you have one back here.
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. So your publisher, and just what I'm hearing you say is that the AI publishing, the AIJ is its sweet spot is dealing with data, interpreting that data, and organizing that data for publication, as opposed to, or in support of, what we could call traditional journalism, where people are then taking those facts and connecting the dots and inferences and doing the subjective side. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely. For us, we're a publisher, but what's our focus? Our focus in our content is to be fact-based, objective, and no bias. So that's our focus. But for a lot of publishers, they do thrive on the editorial. They do thrive on the voice that comes out with their content, on making connections beyond what the numbers might be able to show, finding correlations. The algorithms can begin to find the correlations, but then you end up looking at correlations that algorithms find, and you see that with Nick Cage movies, more and more people, there's a correlation between Nick Cage films coming out and people falling in pools and drowning. Well, I mean that's useless, and maybe it's not, but at the same, from there, that's when a person steps in. Does it make sense? Does it not? And you can explore it further.
The second question is, your reaction is Watson in the same sandbox?
In a sense, absolutely, and that's part of the reason why we call our algorithms artificial intelligence journalism. Watson functions off of a massive database of content, essentially, and so when you query it with a question, it processes what that question is asking. In the same way that with us, we want to create a new newsletter, and so what keywords should we be using? Zika and mosquito. That's what we want to focus on, and our algorithms will spit out for us what that answer is. So it's related, but at the same time, Watson has a whole different agenda that it's going for. Yeah.
The AI journalism from a prospect of social media.
If you repeat the question.
What's happening with folks here right now?
So the question was, does and please tell me if I'm saying this wrong. Do our algorithms have we tried tackling social media, essentially? We've messed with it, but it was more just out of curiosity. Our focus is professional content, as opposed to internet buzz. So professional content, the content that decision makers that they want to act on. Not saying Twitter sentiment doesn't impact the company. It does, but that's sentiment analysis, and that's a whole different area that a lot of startups are working in already. So for us, it's not a focus. Yeah.
You described how you make money more specifically. Are you sending out these newsletters yourself, getting advertising, getting a subscription base, and being paid by other publishers who are asking for a fee, newspaper and tech research, licensing fee, presenters there, newsletter? How actually do you
Yeah, absolutely. Primarily subscriptions, individual newsletter subscriptions, in some cases site licenses. A traditional model has been content licensing as well.
What price points?
Individual newsletters range from on annual rates, $500 per year to, our largest ones are about $3,000 a year. And then site licenses, it completely depends on the organization, the use, and, how much of a site license. We publish 5,000 articles every single day. So for some, they want everything. Well, that's a whole different ballpark from someone that just wants a site license focused on life science content, for example.
How does your sales model with the subscriptions? It sounds like it's repeat subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have sales force selling these subscriptions?
We do. We do. It's actually something that we're diving into much more aggressively now. For the past few years, we have focused pretty much all of our efforts on the platform that I used for that, simplistic walkthrough of how newsletters get made. But that platform is kind of where our traditional subscribers access their content now. And so that's been our focus.
Related to that, CW, how many people do you have on payroll, and what types of people and bundles would they be?
Right, we have about 10 people in Atlanta, and we have about 5 in at our New Haven, Connecticut office. And both offices do some tech, and most of the tech is in Atlanta. And we're pretty much automated from one end to the other. Pretty much everything is automated.
So 15.
And in New Haven, we're focusing on business development, employee recruitment, training, that kind of stuff. The New Haven office is, the 5 people are all either Yale grads or Yale students. It's right next to the Yale campus there in New Haven.
Okay, one more, and then I have one final question that'll be very quick. Go ahead.
You mentioned the mosquito and Zika.
Yeah.
It had about 50 to 150 articles.
Right.
How much of that is it aggregated articles from that you're going out there finding? How much of it is actually written by your algorithms?
Just about all of it.
Is completely rewritten articles?
Actually,
fresh
well,
content?
yeah, I don't know why I said just about. All of it is. It's all our content that we've put out. So the content is reporting on whether it's a patent that got approved for a company that deals with some type of immunization for Zika. We'll take that patent, but the patents are incredibly long, so we'll report on what that patent is about, what it's focused on, what the company is, and then as with just about all of our content, we do direct them back out to, if you want to read the full patent, this is where you'd find it.
Is that written by the company that is announcing that patent in the press release? That's not necessarily.
No, that's our algorithms actually will go through and report on that article or patent or whatever it might be.
Okay, I'd say pretty stimulating information, conversation. How many in the room would still be in the dinosaur camp? We have 12. I think we're dinosaur or potentially mutants. I think we are. How about the robot category? You? Wow, okay. There you
Yeah.
go. Sounds like you've got some compatriots.
Some
Doesn't surprise me,
cyborgs.
so. Anyway, thank you so much. I hope you continue this conversation and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Absolutely.